We have to be ready to commit much more than we ever have to our kids, not only this year, but the next 5 and 10 years. If not, honestly, we risk a lost generation of students. And as they grow up and they take their place in our society and our country, I'm worried for us. I'm worried for all of us if we don't do the right thing and fill those gaps that are there, that we are starting to see in our schools when we're looking kids in the eyes and having conversations with them. And we're only a quarter of the way in. We're successfully completing our first quarter of school right now. We have 3 quarters ahead of us. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I'm not sure the impact of the flu and COVID or anything else, but we're in school. We're going to stay on that march as long as it's safe. And in Cherry Creek, we developed the metric system that now the rest of the state, other school districts, CDPHE have all adopted. It's that data-based approach to decision-making around safety in our community and our schools. We developed it in Cherry Creek. We're proud of that, and we'll continue to use that as we move forward. What that brings me to then is a conversation around what can we do here locally? Because I can't control the state, can't control the nation, but I can control us here locally. And so we were cut by $25.2 million this year from the state of Colorado because of the impact of COVID. We're told to anticipate another $33 million in cuts next year. So a total of $60 million in cuts to your local school district that's doing the right thing in the right way for the right reason. And I've just told you I am extraordinarily worried about our kids and having a lost generation of them. So at the same time, the prospect of cutting hundreds of teachers, nurses, mental health in our future, we have to double down what we're doing. And so in Cherry Creek, to address that $60 million gap, I have initially identified $14 million of cuts there to the central office. Central cuts is the first place we have to go. They're real people, they're coaches, they're coordinators, they're administrators, they're support staff. They're important to the operation of our organization, but you have to make your first cuts away from the classroom. We have done that. Our Board of Education then called for an election 4A. You probably see the signs pop up this last week. It is for a $35 million mill levy override to start to close that gap. That leaves another $10 million for next year. I believe we can cover that through additional furlough days. This year, every staff member, all 9,000 employees took a salary freeze. All teachers took 5 furlough days, and all administrators took 6 furlough days to get us to a $60 million hole. We can cover that. So if it was successful in the election, the 14 I've identified, and a few more furlough days, we can get through this crisis. We can continue to do the right things for kids. So then I can focus my efforts on the legislature and the state of Colorado to provide more funding for schools so that we can save these kids literally from the future that's ahead of them if we don't fill these gaps into mental health goals. And so that's one of our major focus areas, is on how to close that gap. And to be truthful and completely blunt and honest with you, if we don't pass that election, on November 4th, I start identifying the first 250 teachers that we will cut, that we will fire. We are fortunate to have a nurse in every building. We're the only school district in the state to have it. And I'll tell you, during the pandemic, it's been pretty helpful to get us to the school. We'll have to go to models like other school districts have, where they have 1 for every 5 schools or so. Have to cut mental health, have to cut administrators. We're a people business where 90% of our money goes into people because we work with kids. We don't build things and stuff. And when we have to make these cuts, that's what it becomes. That's devastating to kids. It's devastating to our community. It's devastating to those hundreds of people that all of a sudden don't have jobs and can't contribute themselves. And so the ripple effects of this would be extraordinary, not only for our kids, for our property values, and also for our community. That's why we're pushing hard and fighting hard for that now, even in the middle of a pandemic. Second part of this 4B is our capital campaign. We have drawn that back from $300 to $150 million. And the way we structure debt in Cherry Creek is a 0 tax increase bond. $150 million, most of it's major maintenance and upkeep. I believe our community expects us to keep our schools looking good, keep the roofs from leaking, keep the wire and plumb and HVAC working. And it's a major investment in the community. It's the hub of the neighborhood, and we have a responsibility to support the investment of past generations. Safety and security is always a significant aspect of it. Even though we're in a health pandemic, we have to be thinking about physical safety of our students as well, because that just hasn't gone away. And I worry about that even more with the mental health issues that kids will have coming out of this. We might have more physical safety issues post-COVID as we come back to school next year. We have to be prepared for that and be thoughtful about that. We need to build 1 more elementary school in Cherry Creek, down southeast, Blackstone community area. We have an elementary school that's over 900. We'll grow to over 1,400 students in the coming years if we don't provide some relief. Some areas of our district have not been impacted economically by COVID, as some others have. So they continue to move in and build new homes, and we need to provide that neighborhood school, that commitment that we've always made. Some innovation spaces, a few other things, some technology, back behind the wall stuff. But one of the smallest parts, but I think one of the most impactful, is that the state of Colorado has really failed mental health of adults and kids. There are not treatment facilities for kids. We have kids today walking our schools that need more help than we can provide. So we are going to hopefully build our own day treatment facility. We're working on private-public partnerships. I've run with mental health, Aurora Mental Health Colorado, Caring for Colorado, Gary Family Foundation, Children's Hospital, Kaiser. They're all interested in partnering with us so that we can continue to provide school to those individuals while they provide the therapy to those individuals so that we can get them back to school, a comprehensive school and a comprehensive life, and they can contribute the way we all want them to. So that's a new and different role for us as a school district, but the funding from the state has just diminished significantly, and so there are not spots for kids to get their needs met. So those are the two big pieces out there that we're campaigning for right now, but they really tie back to if we do not do what we need to do locally with 4A, 4B, but as a state, moving forward, we risk this generation of kids. And we are seeing it today. And again, I'll make the point, we're in school. I worry for kids that haven't stepped a foot in school yet and may not step a foot in school this year. And the impact of being out of school for a year and a half in person could be devastating. And so I'm glad that our teachers, let me make this point to you because I think you might appreciate it. Our teachers union voted to come back to school with our reopening plan and supported it at a 91% level. The union, because our teachers value kids and education that much. And so that's an important piece to share as well. So with that, that's just a very brief high-level overview. We're in school, it's working well, it's safe. We've quarantined 1,100 kids today because of potential exposure, and we had 4 kids that became COVID positive during quarantine. 0.3% of kids and staff that were quarantined became COVID positive. So the numbers are extraordinarily low, regardless of what you hear or see in the media, where they say there's 1 new case, but that also tells you that there's 55,000 other kids that don't have it and are doing well and are in skill learning. And so I'm going to work hard over the coming weeks to change that narrative and tell the positive side of that story, that the multiple overlapping safety strategies we've implemented are working. And so with that, I'd be happy to take any questions from, yes, sir. Gallagher Amendment alone doesn't do a whole lot for us. And if it were tied with a change in Tabor as well, that took away maybe the ratcheting effect of Tabor, it could be very helpful for us. And as Tabor ratchets us down, we don't recover the way the economy did. So even after the 08 recession, we never recovered in public education because we were ratcheted down so far. I am a strong supporter of coming to my community and making the case, and proving the need for an election for a mill levy override. I fully support that part of Tabor. The ratcheting part along with Gallagher is harmful. And so one without the other doesn't do a great amount for us, but as a start. Yes, sir.
Of those cases that became COVID positive, how many recovered?
Everybody's recovered completely of those cases. We had tracked it, and actually, if you're interested, on our website, we publish live updates every day of the number of cases of positive kids and teachers and staff, number of quarantined, and the number that we have to move operationally remote. And it's becoming such a struggle with, before CDPH updated their guidance last week, which I appreciate them doing that. We were so short on teachers because every time they were in the same classroom, they had to be quarantined, that I have substituted classes this year myself. 2 reasons. It's hard to get subs right now. A lot of subs are retired teachers that don't necessarily want to be back in classrooms during this. I get that. 2, I believe in walking your talk. And if I said to my community and my teachers it's safe to be in a classroom, I darn well would be there too. And so I have been, and that's been an important part of my learning through this, and I felt safe. And so it's working. Yes, ma'am.
Have you noticed the drop in attendance for kids actually online or in person?
Thank you. So yes, we've noticed a drop in attendance, and as I work with my colleagues around the state or around the Front Range, we are all noticing it. We're down about 2.5% from what we predicted. So we're missing 1,300 kids from what we thought we would have this year. As we track them down, there are kids in campgrounds in the middle of the desert doing things remotely. There are kids that are homeschooled, there are pods, there are kids that have just, families have sold their homes and moved across the country and with relatives. So there's a lot of different ways that people address this time, but that's another potential impact on the budget if the state legislature doesn't hold us harmless or do some other aspects. That's another $10 million cuts for us. But it is across the board. It is every school district is seeing that decline right now. Yes, sir.
How's that trade school?
The Innovation Campus is open. Yes, this Cherry Creek Innovation Campus is open and operating. We are still giving kids the skills, the degrees, the certifications they need to go out and get a career, join the military, or use that to go to college. Part of this bond would expand some of those sections, but we're primarily looking at healthcare, nurses, and mental health techs. We already had a waiting list, and through a pandemic and coming out of this, we're going to need more in those areas. So that's what we're first looking to expand, but it's open and working well. Yes, sir. Most are students, just because of the numbers. We have 55,000 students, and so proportionally it's pretty equal. What we're finding is I track the data every day through our metric, and we're at a spike right now in Arapahoe County, and it's staying steady. It's not coming back down. But at the same time we've had a spike in the county, our cases have actually decreased in schools. What I'm finding is that kids and teachers get it. They might come in, but it's not being spread in schools. And so that's again, it's the narrative we need to change and help people to understand. But it's based on doing it right. Our kids and our adults that wear masks. We have ventilation increase. We have MERV 13 filters. We have free testing for all of our adults. We have hand sanitizer. We sanitize the rooms and the whole school. So we put everything into place that we should. It's working. Yes, sir.
I'm personally supportive of both initiatives, but as I went through all the data that's provided in the blue book and gray book, I guess, it looks like we spend about $13,000 or a little bit more per student if you just divide the total budget by. How does that looks like it compares high to a lot of the surrounding school districts, but how does that compare internationally?
So Colorado, unfortunately, for the great state that we are, really underfunds education compared to most every other state. When you're comparable to Mississippi, you got to question where you are. Sorry if there's but I think you really got to look at that. And that amount of money, we get about $8,000 per pupil. Then we have our mill levy overrides that, our local voters approve it, they pay for it, and it stays in our schools. It doesn't get shared with anyone else. And you can point to the projects that it supports. That's what allows us to be excellent and not adequate. And we have never thought that adequate was good enough for our kids. Sir?
Average teacher salary, that's Cherry Creek versus the rest of the metro area.
We are one of the top 2 in the state, so we usually compete with Boulder for one of the top, and we think that's important. One, to value our educators, and second, we get the best.
Just find it interesting that we have such low, as the state of Colorado, we have some of the highest education, like professionals that work here. We are one of the highest states that has secondary degrees. So I find that interesting that we're not investing in our youth. We're investing in our careers, but we're not investing in our youth. Have we seen a drop in population, younger population? Is there a correlation?
We've seen a necessarily correlation with that. If I look at our boundaries, where our growth is starting to slow. We're growing out east, we're shrinking in the west. Neighborhoods are not turning over like you might typically see. Younger families moving in, which is great because people love to live there and we love them living there. But what I tell you is if you live with us, in our boundaries, have your grandkids move in. We need them. That's an expectation. They come live with you and go to school in Cherry Creek. Because we're not seeing that turnover that we would count on typically in some of our older communities.
Yeah.
I see that you're getting closer, closer.
So my 6-year-old nephew came home, and he's in church, and while he washes his hands, he sings happy birthday twice.
Why?
Is that something being taught?
It is. We're very specific about the routine. You do it, and there's a time for it, and we teach it. We're going to do whatever it takes to stay in school. One last thing. Football starts this Thursday, and so we are doing football. We have cheers, we have pep bands, and we're doing it right. We're going to prove to the rest of the state how to do it right, just like we did school. It will be live streamed for free. The link will be on our website, so you can actually watch some maybe good Colorado football.
Thanks so much. We appreciate you coming. Do you have a minute if anybody just has another question while they're in the room? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Again, well wishes out to Phil. Keep him in your prayers and his family, and we'll see you next week.